Number 10. The Minish Cap. Capcom's selection of Zelda games have been known to take bold risks in gameplay and story, the Minish Cap being one of their finest. A young Link encounters a talking hat named Ezlo, who gifts Link with the ability to shrink. This can get you into areas you couldn't have before, or just make you tiny in areas you've already been in. It's this dynamic that changes the way puzzles and dungeons are constructed. Zelda games before and after have given players the ability to change their surroundings, but the Minish Cap offered one of the most unique ways. Oh, and cloning yourself? Count me in.
How do you follow up a Zelda game that to this day is cherished as a masterpiece, and by some the best in the series? You move it to a different location, and Link's Awakening's Koholint was the first excellent proof of why Zelda games do not have to be solely confined to the land of Hyrule.
With a beautiful soundtrack, interesting characters, unique enemies, and a wide variety of well-crafted dungeons and boss battles, this game is nearly as solid as other entries on this list. And yes, its original story, which is topped with a devastating twist and what is likely the greatest dilemma in the Zelda series, just adds to what already is a great Zelda game.
Number 9. The Legend of Zelda. No matter where you go, it's always important to remember where you came from. The first Legend of Zelda told players nothing, absolutely nothing from the very start. You can literally walk past this cave right here and not get the wooden sword, which is what birthed the famous quote,
"'Tis dangerous to go alone. Take this."
We were then left with a sprawling open world we could easily get lost in. Seriously, we got lost. It was tough finding all 9 dungeons, especially with all these damn Octoroks getting in my way. The original Legend of Zelda is great, but let's face it, it hasn't aged all too well. That's why it's so low on this list. The fact that Eiji Aonuma himself claims that he can't even beat it says a lot. The game is still overwhelming now as it was 31 years ago. It's incredibly tough to beat without a map and save states. However, this was very common for games back in the NES era, and Zelda is not as hard as, say, Ghosts and Goblins. Or Zelda 2. There's just a lot to find in places you wouldn't even think of looking. Number 8. Oracle of Ages and Seasons. As I stated when talking about the Minish Cap, the Capcom Zelda games made some bold decisions in their design. And quite possibly, their boldest move was pulling the Pokemon formula and coming out with 2 separate Zelda games on the Game Boy Color at the same time, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. At their core, they're mostly the same, but their themes are dramatically different. Oracle of Seasons was actually the first Zelda game that I've ever played. My older sister just had a Game Boy Color lying around, and Seasons was one of these games she had. In this version, Link used a Rod of Seasons to change the seasons in just about any location to get around, solve puzzles, etc. In Ages, he used the Rod of Ages to change from past to present to do the same thing. Kind of similar to the Light and Dark worlds in A Link to the Past, but with much more variety. In a sense, most Zelda games gave players the ability to change their surroundings almost instantly. But these 2 games did it in such a unique way that makes me wonder what Capcom could do again if they were allowed to make another Zelda title. Skyward Sword. Possibly the most polarizing entry in the Zelda franchise to date. You ask any fan about how they feel towards this game, and it'll vary between pure utter hatred in their hearts to, it wasn't that bad. I was in the latter party. After Breath of the Wild was announced as Zelda U back in 2014, I took it upon myself to finally play Skyward Sword after 3 years of putting it off. When I finally played it after years of hearing about how much of a disgrace it was, I actually thought it was pretty good. Sure, it's linear as all hell, has some annoying motion control puzzles, and the Imprisoned is the most annoying boss ever made, but the colorful characters, well thought out dungeons, and quite possibly the best Zelda story of all time made Skyward Sword a delight for me to play. Maybe it helped that I knew another Zelda game was on its way, but I'm glad I played it when I did. I appreciate this game more for what it is than hate it for what it isn't.
Skyward Sword as the first game in the official Zelda timeline is the entry that does some things better than any other installment, namely story and character development. Who can forget the fabulous Gyurem or Zelda's quest for personal discovery? This game, with some of the most creative gameplay features such as silent realms and the long-awaited inclusion of crafting, stood as proof that motion controls could indeed work if applied to the correct material.
What kept Skyward Sword away from a higher position on my personal list are the flaws. These include recycling of boss battles, being too bound and linear outside of the dungeons, adding several hours of filler leading up to the final dungeon, and much, much more. But the soundtrack was satisfying. What do you end up with if you're told to remake A Link to the Past, but rather desire to make a new and more non-linear entry with the same assets? The best 2D Zelda game since A Link to the Past. For some, A Link Between Worlds might be a clone of the SNES classic, but for me it is the best possible reimagining enhanced by an ingenious wall merging mechanic in an updated 2.5D environment. Solid and reinvented dungeons and bosses with improved mechanics and the freedom to rent items, thus leaving the dungeon progression after the first dungeon completely up to you.
This would combine with a number of good minigames, a deeply satisfying main quest, and engaging side quests with both interesting and well thought out characters with a twist or two. The only things that drag this game down is that it borrows too much from A Link to the Past. In other words, this game is perfect for anyone who hasn't played A Link to the Past, and a great nostalgia trip for those who want to relive that magic from well over 25 years ago.
Number 6. Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask is a game that a lot of Zelda fans hold near and dear to their hearts. Why is that though? It was made in a year, only has 4 dungeons, and it has a frickin' timer. This should be a disaster. Well, guess what? Quite the contrary. In fact, it was a damn good game despite the fact that it was derivative of the Zelda formula. Sure, there are still dungeons and items, but then there are the masks that change you into a different race like a Goron or Zora and use their powers to aid you in your quest to save the world from a creepy ass moon with a face on it. Oh, and there's a Skull Kid that makes this 10,000 times darker than any Zelda game to date. We also love this game for its dark and somber themes of death. With only 72 hours on the clock, doom is reaching Termina head on, and the closer it gets, the more people start losing their sanity. It's some truly messed up stuff. Why is this game only number 6 on my list though? Because I didn't get to play the game until it came out on the 3DS, so I don't have that much of an attachment to it as most other people understandably do.
In his question and answer session with Nintendo of Europe, AG Anuma mentioned that Twilight Princess is one of his favourite Zelda games. In fact, so much was this the case that he aimed with that game's development to surpass Ocarina of Time. And believe us, Twilight Princess is an excellent Zelda game with some of the absolute best characters, including the mysterious hero Shade, items, dungeons, and boss designs in the series. And it also has, by no doubt, the best companion in the entire series in the form of Midna.
The story in Twilight Princess is well crafted with an intimidating and mature story surrounding a bloody invasion from the Twilight Realm, which involves expelled interlopers, the twisted Twilight and a vengeful Ganondorf. This game has so many great innovations, but still suffers for a few key reasons. First one must be that the game is too easy for its serious tone. This goes in particular for the brain-dead bosses and the rather empty overworld where hidden skills and key items are for the most part wasted opportunities. Secondly, it has the absolute worst tutorial section in any Zelda game. Finally, just like A Link Between Worlds, this game tries too hard to replicate the success of a predecessor, in this case Ocarina of Time. As a result, this excellent Zelda experience borrows a little bit too much and struggles to stand on its own compared to some of the other games on this list.
A Link Between Worlds may be great, but A Link to the Past is simply better. Where do we even begin? This game improved nearly every flaw from the NES Zelda games and took the Super Nintendo by storm. It introduced the dual world concept, which became a staple for a number of Zelda games to come after, gave the largest amount of dungeons in any Zelda game, introduced us to Kakariko, and even the almighty Master Sword.
The third entry in the Zelda franchise is often considered to be the best in the Zelda franchise. Not by me though, hence why it's number 5 on the list. After the unsuccessful transition to side-scrolling with Zelda 2, Nintendo went back to the top-down roots, and what we got was nothing short of a masterpiece. A Link to the Past took the first Legend of Zelda formula and perfected it, with a map and more. Even though this game holds your hand more than the original, it still doesn't tell you a lot. I didn't know until I watched one of my friends play that you can go through the entire game without knowing certain items even exist.
The backstory of the imprisoning war and the prologue section in this game were perfect, the mid-game twist ingenious, and the dungeons and boss battles among the best in the series. Aghanim was an excellent villain, building up to a classic confrontation against Ganon.
Number 4. Twilight Princess. Speaking of Dark World, Twilight Princess was another dark tale for The Legend of Zelda. Not as dark as Majora's Mask, hell no, but it's up there. When I said Oracle of Seasons was the first Zelda game I played, Twilight Princess was the first one I've beaten, so it holds a special place in my heart as the first game I truly loved, so that's why it's higher on this list. Unfortunately, having played the HD re-release, I realized that it might not be as great as nostalgia made it out to be. The vast, open areas are reminiscent of Hyrule Field from Ocarina of Time, but they're not as revolutionary as Hyrule Field was back in 1998. There's just a whole lot of nothing except bugs, pose souls, too many rupees. However, there are a lot of really good things about Twilight Princess, one of which is your companion, Midna. But where Twilight Princess shines are the dungeons, being some of the most expertly crafted ones in the series, boasting creative abilities like walking on ceilings and controlling robots. Plus, this was the last time we get to see a photorealistic art style in a Zelda game, and I hope we get to see it return in a future title. The Wind Waker. The Wind Waker is just pure delight all around. I can't not look at this game without getting a big smile on my face. Everything about The Wind Waker just makes my heart and many other hearts happy. And to think people scorned this game when it was first announced because of its art style. To be fair, I probably would have too if I saw the tech demo from Space World 2000. Nevertheless, The Wind Waker is stunning. Sure, it has some problems like endless sailing, forced stealth, and tedious Triforce Piece missions, but there's a reason why many people consider it to be the best 3D Zelda game ever. The dungeons and bosses are great as usual. However, what I love most about The Wind Waker is the artistic expression. The minute I boot it up and hear that legendary title theme is the moment I'm excited to play The Wind Waker once again.
This game is what Twilight Princess wasn't, a Zelda game which dared to distance itself from its obvious ties to Ocarina of Time by throwing us into a massive new setting, the Great Sea, with a timeless cel shading art style. The Wind Waker may not be hard, but it is so gorgeous with its warm, splendid cast of characters. With the introduction of the Rito and Koroks, an excellent and unique companion in the form of the King of Red Lions, and an incredible sea full of islands and secrets to explore.
The main quest is captivating, the side activities rewarding, and the confrontations against Ganondorf damn perfect, as his character finally gets some well-deserved development. This voyage has everything from sharks, sea battles against ships, and giant octopuses. Some downright magical moments involving your closest family members and the greatest pirates of the Great Sea. The only thing that drags this experience down is the fact that there are few dungeons and that some of them are not exactly among the best. And by the way, screw you Tingle and your goddamn shard quest. Luckily, this ordeal was heavily improved along with the sailing mechanic in Wind Waker HD. Some games have greater impact on your life than others. Majora's Mask came out at probably the most difficult period of my life. Just a month prior, I had lost my Polish grandmother to cancer, and my Norwegian grandfather was slowly passing away as a result of ALS. Needless to say, this game that basically represents the 5 stages of grief could not have been a better fit for me personally. This game that had the impossible job to follow up after Ocarina of Time. Boy, did this game take a different and depressing route with the best town in Zelda history, characters that felt alive and expressive like never before, side quests.
Majora's Mask is like no other game and is one of the Zelda games with the most replay value, as all of the dungeons and dungeon bosses can be replayed in their entirety from start to finish. The main villain is as though it is taken straight out of the worst nightmares conceivable. The world is also the most compact, the music the best in the series, which just fuels the depressing setting that is Termina. There is so much to love about this game that was developed in little over a year. Unfortunately, this rush resulted in the need to cut down content, such as additional dungeons or a 1-week cycle instead of the 3-day cycle found in the game.
Before we move over to the final 2, we want to point out that Leo has set up his own Tumblr where you can get easy access to his excellent voicing services. Go and check out leolinguistics.tumblr.com. And now for the final 2, and let us just say it was super narrow as to which of these 2 masterpieces takes the crown.
Number 2, Ocarina of Time. It goes without saying that Ocarina of Time is quite arguably the most important game in 3D gaming history.
When I'm asked what is the strongest thing about Ocarina of Time, I will always answer perfect pacing. Everything from the story, dungeons, bosses is paced perfectly. And yes, I will admit, my love for this game might be influenced by the fact that Ocarina of Time was the first Zelda game I played way back in 1998. But heck, Ocarina of Time is an epic adventure from beginning to end. It begins well and only gets better and better, minus the damned water temple, as it builds up to the final, unmatched to this day, confrontation. The motivation to take down Ganondorf while exploring what back then was a massive world triggered my passion for this series, as I got introduced to Hyrule, the Hylians, Kokiri, Gorons, Sheikah, Gerudo, and the gentle Zoras.
This game, which made the transition from 2D to 3D nearly flawlessly, changed the franchise forever and is the reason why in both the timeline and the history of the franchise, we talk about Zelda before Ocarina and Zelda after Ocarina. The innovations with Z-Lock targeting, backflips, Hyrule Field, Epona, the godlike music, its towns, settlements, and the first 3D dungeons and bosses. But that was before you pulled the Master Sword and realized that Link had fucked up. The game is a joy to play from beginning to end, and there's a good reason as to why Zelda games before and after have been living in Ocarina's shadow, since it did it first. In fact, it would have also been our number 1 if it weren't for a leap like no other in the past few years.
It took nearly 19 years, but boy are we glad that the throne has a new master.
Rare is it for a new entry in any video game series to automatically become the best in the series, but I don't blame you if you still like Ocarina of Time more. Taking inspiration from various other open world games and perfecting the elements from them, Breath of the Wild gives us a definitive open air experience that allows you to do anything. Just about anything. This game is the definition of boundless. A lot of games claim you can go anywhere and do anything, but Breath of the Wild actually means it. But let me be the first to admit that this game is not perfect. the divine beasts are weak compared to the best dungeons in the series, and the final boss phase and ending left me with mixed emotions. But even though this makes it impossible for me to give it a 10 out of 10, I can't deny that this somber post-apocalyptic masterpiece is simply better than Ocarina and Majora and crushes the likes of Witcher 3 or Skyrim because of one key element: freedom to climb, freedom to explore, freedom to interact with nearly everything in this world. It might not have the pacing of Ocarina, the musical score of Majora, or the enemy variety of the Wind Waker, but the combat and villains are of an entirely different breed this time around. You can kill enemies in one hit, or be killed in one hit. Who needs a hard mode when the game is already hard? The only negatives about Breath of the Wild are the ending, no spoilers, and the lack of a traditional dungeon system. However, the divine beasts and shrines still give us the satisfying feeling of successfully solving a puzzle, only this time implementing physics.
Since it speaks volumes when a simple mechanic such as climbing makes the game not last 20 or 30 hours, but well over 200 to locate all lost memories, shrines, get all heart containers or stamina vessels, and many more hours to find the tiny but adorable Koroks of this land. I could blabber on and on for hours as to why Breath of the Wild is our time's Ocarina, a game changer in the true sense of the word, but for now I will just say that it is our number one on this list as it represents a more matured and evolved form of art.
And on that note, we want to thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like, share, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and other in-depth Nintendo videos. We hope you all have a fabulous day, and if you haven't already, make sure to check out our hour-long complete Legend of Zelda timeline or our take on Zora's Domain.